This is For the Governed, a podcast series brought to you by Athalonz. Here are your hosts, Tim Markison and Ron Cates.
Hello and welcome to another very, very interesting Athalonz podcast. I'm Ron Cates. I'm here with Tim Markison, the CEO and founder of Athalonz. Today's subject is about science. And is a scientific study really scientific?
With respect to science, I did a quick Google search on that. It's hundreds of millions of hits just with the word science.
363 million hits.
Yeah,
Who would have thought?
That's a lot. But then, you take a step back, at least I did, and I started thinking about it. But, science really influences every aspect of our life, from, our healthcare to our technology to, pretty much every aspect of our life. I mean, you fill in the blanks and, science has a part in that. But then because it's used so much and it's so prevalent, I think the meaning has kind of gotten lost of what science is. And then there's also an implication that, if it's based in science, it must be true and works for everybody. And that's not the case. And that's not really what science is. Science, for the short definition, is really just the pursuit of knowledge. It's the pursuit of how things work. So, life sciences look at how living things work. We add a stimulant to this, what's going to happen? What's the likely thing that's going to happen? The study of the physical world, the universe around us, how all that stuff works. That's a different discipline. And then there's social sciences as well. So, all of those things are really working towards building knowledge of how things work and being able to predict if we do this and this, what kind of outcome are we going to get?
So I know that there are certain aspects of science that they're laws or facts, but then there's a whole lot of other science also.
Right. Yeah. So there are certain things that as a collective being, so humanity, we know really well. So, like some of the fundamentals of physics. So if I drop an apple or a ball from 3 feet high, no matter how many times I drop that, the apple's gonna drop to the ground. And if it's from 3 feet high, I can calculate how fast it's gonna hit, the velocity that it's gonna hit the ground, the impact force that it's gonna hit the ground, and the time it takes is always gonna be the same. There's been significant amount of study throughout the centuries on that. And so that's a scientific fact. So if I drop a ball, it's gonna fall to the ground and it's gonna have a certain velocity at the point of impact. It's gonna have an impact force and I'll know that time and it'll always be the same.
But I hear all the time though, it's a scientific fact that X equals whatever, and it's not.
Yeah. So for something to be a scientific fact, it has to be always true with no known exceptions. So I could drop a ball 1 billion times, and as long as all 1 billion times it goes to the ground, that's going to be a scientific fact. But if one time I'm doing that test, it goes up, well, now it's no longer a scientific fact because there's a known exception to that. So with respect to scientific facts, it's those observations that have been observed so many times and they always produce the same results with no known exceptions. And then the mathematical models that we can create to predict how they'll work, those are the scientific laws. So gravity, which is what we were talking about, there's scientific laws on how that works, the mathematical models, and then the scientific facts are, things, the gravitational force between bodies and the smaller object is drawn towards the bigger. That's why we stay on the ground. That's why things fall to the ground, because the Earth is so much bigger in mass.
So what about when things haven't been proven yet to be true, but we're pretty sure they would be true if they were tested?
Yeah. So on things that we as a humanity doesn't know that well, then we implore a scientific method. And part of that scientific method is creating hypotheses of how this is going to work. And when we have a hypothesis for, I think this is how this is going to work, well, then we start to either conduct tests or we test that theory. We test that hypothesis to see if it has some credibility or not. with respect to, the physical sciences, we usually do experiments, so like dropping the ball, things like that. With respect to life sciences, we do studies. So if we take an example, so I have this hypothesis of, if I take supplement XYZ, it's going to improve running stamina. So that's my hypothesis. I haven't tested it, haven't really done anything. So now I need to do a study to see if that hypothesis has any merit or not. So I would conduct a test, relatively short, relatively simple test, just to see if there's any merit to that hypothesis. So for example, I'd take 20 individuals, and I'd want those 20 individuals to be as like of character in nature as possible. So to eliminate as many variables. Ideally, what I'd like to do is take 20 clones of people. Then the only variable would be the introduction of this supplement, but that's just not feasible or probably not ethical. Well, it's not ethical. So we try in those early studies to get people of like characteristics. So people that are in good shape, of about the same age, their lifestyles are very similar. So we can eliminate a lot of variables. So we can really test that hypothesis.
But at that point, do we only know that it works for that particular subset of humans?
Right. Well, so depending on the results of that study, so let's say we do a 6-week study, we run them through, we have them all execute the same running program, and at the end of 6 weeks, we tabulate that data. So in how we would set up the study, and this is the way all studies are done, is you have a control group, so they would receive a placebo without the supplement, and then you'd have your test group, which would have taken that supplement, and you compare the results of the test group with the control group. And if you see a lot of positive improvement in the test group over the control group, well, then you can start, okay, there's merit in my hypotheses. The more balanced it is between the two, so if it's 50% of the people in the test group had about the same results of 50% in the control group, well, that theory doesn't hold, or that hypothesis really doesn't have any merit, because whether they took it or not, they had the same results. Control group had the same results.
So 2 questions from that then.
Yeah.
In a study, what number of people would it what percentage of the people in the study would it have to impact, and what would the impact have to be?
Yeah. So that's going to vary depending on the stage of the study and the validity of that hypothesis. So for our example here, this is the first time we've studied this hypothesis. So
let's say they're going to use, if they take desiccated liver, because I remember this from the early 70s, it'll improve their endurance.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say, anywhere north of 50% of the test group showing positive results by doing that gives some credibility to that hypothesis. So the more higher that percentage is, the more credibility that hypothesis has. But all that suggests is that further tests are warranted. So now we would have to expand the demographic of people, expand the duration of the tests, as well as look at potential side effects. So from that study that we just did with testing performance with 20 people, all we can conclusively say scientifically about that is, yes, that hypothesis has some merit, or no, it doesn't. We can't say that, oh, yeah, take this and you're going to improve, because 7 out of 10 people in this very, very controlled and limited study did so. That's where we start to get in from, good science turning into bad science. So the other part of doing this study is we want to make sure that there's no bias in the study. So that's why you give the control group the placebo and you give the test group the actual, and nobody knows
if they're getting one or the other, right?
Right. And then you have to look at, the bias of the people conducting the test. So if they're paid by the corporation that makes supplement XYZ, you start to wonder, are they really unbiased or not? So the best way to do it is what's called a double-blind study, is the people conducting the test have no idea who is in the control group and who's in the test group. They're just collecting data and analyzing it. So that's a key point of following the scientific method. And then the other part is the test has to be made the study has to be made publicly available for peer review. So others can test that hypotheses, review the test that was done and conduct our own tests to further substantiate that hypothesis or disprove it.
So I know what peer review is, but I don't, and we hear it all the time, but I don't think everyone understands it. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So so I have a hypothesis. We'll use this one for example. Supplement XYZ helps endurance. And then I would conduct that test. I would want to make that available to my peers, so the scientific community, so they could further substantiate my hypotheses, do additional tests on it, rerun my test to see if they get the same result, so we can really start improving the knowledge with respect to that hypothesis. Because again, science is all about knowledge and understanding how things work. So the more tests that are done, the more varied the test, the more people we have, the more diverse people we have in that test, and looking for side effects. Well, now we actually start to build a knowledge base that, yes, now we've done years of testing, we've gone across a wide demographic of people, and yes, 7 out of 10 people show improvement. Now we can say with scientific probability that, if you take this, you've got a 70% chance of improving your endurance as a runner.
So the tricky part, though, right, is that there are manufacturers who will say they have a scientific study and the results were extraordinary, but it really wasn't a scientific study.
Right. So and again, that happens in two ways. If they make a claim, we did this study and we had these extraordinary results, and the study isn't publicly available for review, then it's not scientific. And then the other side where they do this a lot is they'll take that preliminary study of 20 people, very controlled set of people and like characteristics, and say, this applies to everybody. So both of those situations, not making the study publicly available and extrapolating a very small study to say that it applies to everybody, that's taking good science and making it bad. And I hate to say that, but it's part of marketing is to extrapolate and take good science and make it bad, which then casts doubt on real scientific studies and a lot of scientific validity.